What's going on, everyone? How are you? I have a new bait to demo, but really briefly before I go right into it, I want to show you what my motivation for that bait was. Okay, just so I can cover it right now and get out of the way. It was a Savage Gear 3D glide swimmer, 5.5 inch. This bait wrecks fish, big and small. Big swim baits catch big fish. Small swim baits also catch big fish. And I've caught more fish on this thing than I don't know what to do with. But this is also the last one of its kind. Like I've had like 8 or 9 of these. This is the last one that survived. The rest of them have either like exploded on a dock or a rock or a ledge, or I left them out in the sun too long and they bloated and they didn't swim quite right, or they just like deformed completely in like the summer heat, just being in a box. And they now look like the hills have eyes children. So like they have all, and I've slightly gotten tired of that. They are very, very reasonably priced, like under $20. But you buy enough of those, and you're like, man, I should just, I don't know. And the big thing is everybody's on this whole big swim bait craze. Nobody makes small ones to like smaller ones. Only a few people do it. So I just went on my own to make my own here. So this is my version. I tried to call the Jarmouth Roman, then a few of my friends are like, oh, Roman Maid's gonna throw a big fit. They call this one the Roman because it's supposed to just mimic any real fish. So when you're in Rome, you do as a Roman. So when it's a certain time of the season, this bait is just like a long stickish. It could be a shad, it could be a baby bass, it could be a baby striper. It could literally be anything it needs to be at the time it needs to be it with the right paint job. It fits the profile. It swims like a gem. It outswims the glide swimmer. It's much more robust than the glide swimmer. It will not break. And guys, you just got to see it for yourself. Check out the footage. Okay, so one of the things you'll see differently on this channel versus all the other bait makers on YouTube is I use strictly clay. Polymer clay, Sculpey, Primo, whatever. I just have different processes for the whole thing. And really, once you get used to these processes, I respect people who use wood for bases or just straight wooden lures, but once you get the grip of this, I don't see why anybody would ever resort back to wood. And so right now I'm just mimicking the clay to fit these two baits, both awesome baits. I'm trying to replicate my own bigger, bolder, badder, and better swimming version of these two things. So I'm just kind of lining it up. But once you have your finished medium, right now I decided instead of to carve it at a cold carve, I'm going to bake that one and then carve it. This one here, I'm going to take a different approach, just showing you right now to preview, but I'm making more or less a backbone spine for it. And I do a technique called wrapping. It's a different section of wrapping polymer clay and then wrapping and baking, and then in between you're doing your details. Comes out super clean. But you can also just straight up bake Sculpey like this and then carve it afterwards, and it still comes out fairly comparable. You do it in much the same way that you would carve wood, but that's a different process for a different time. I'm just kind of showing you how I would make an inner core for a wrapped particle. And just to give you a preview, because that video is also going to come up here pretty soon. After I draw my scales on the entire deal, I do this. I just get a hobby knife. This is a fairly bigger hobby knife, so you can press, kind of clean it. You got to be really careful with sculpting because it crumbles. That's the difference. It's harder to sculpt, it's harder to carve in than wood, but the end results are comparable. So I'm just scoring it right and left. I mean, I drew the whole thing, scoring it, and then you're gonna go the other end, but you rescore it on the other side. You kind of make like a triangular cut. So you go in, when you cut these scores, you go in at an angle, and then you go back down the other angle, and then it just falls right out, and you get fairly good scales. You can't carve too deep into, especially the firm clay. Other clays, when you bake them, you can carve a little deeper in, and you can take more risks. This one, I don't need an extravagantly, awesome profile. I'm trying just to get this thing to be super clean and basic and swim well. So I already got the profile. I need to have in some minor details because, I'm not gonna airbrush these. I'm gonna do another painting process. I'll show you about that. But I'm really relying mainly on the detail to pull off whatever my lack of skills with the painting process entails. So that's why I'm going through all this work here. I'm only using the chisel here because I'm running very, very fine lines down it, which is also a risk. Chisels, they're kind of a risk for carving the scales. I would use a hobby knife for almost pretty much everything else that you're using, unless you're trying to just get a finite groove where like a wood chisel would do well. But here we're just really using different types of X-Acto knives and different blades, and we're making in all the fine details. Looking about how things are done here, and more or less looking where I'm going to cut it. This is a 55-45 split, I think, before the tail. We're really looking at it. You don't have to have precision to a T with these things, but you do have to be fairly accurate, so getting your own guidelines down and making sure it's straight. Also in carving these, it's very weird. It's once you primer this or you repaint it, you'll see it differently. You'll watch as you put out a resin casting, you'll see a million things you never saw in the master mold. So it's just really important that you put as many guidelines as you can as possible before you go and mold this thing and waste all that time and waste all the money with the mold materials doing it. And then pre-drill the eyes, otherwise your master mold will crack and you'll have to fix it, which isn't the biggest deal right here. That's easily fixable with Sculpey, but really we're using the small screw eyes we possibly can, and we're making marks in for the back. It's a little bit more doable. There's a little bit more margin for error with Sculpey because you can just pre-bake it. You can't do that with other mediums. Just something to keep. But we're making the notches right now. I'm using an X-Acto knife and then this little miniature saw, and then I'm also using needle files. Needle files are a must-have in bake making. Use whatever you have to use, honestly, to get this thing to work. I had to resort to using that little blade there on the drill and then filing out, but eventually I got it to work through all those series of tools we talked about. It's good to go. Because there's so much bait in the water, when in Rome, you need to do as the Romans, and so I put a lot of work into this bait, and I really hope it does well. I can paint this in several different colors: baby bass, shad, and right now I have it in striper. So I think it really only weighs like 2 ounces. Damn, seagulls think it's real. Get away from it, seagull. Oh yeah, look at the action. It's insane action. It swims way better than the glide swimmer does in an erratic motion. It's a full resin mold, so it will not explode, it will not bloat. It's super durable. I'll throw it against the water. I throw it against the wall. Oh my gosh, this is gonna catch so much fish. It actually swims much better than I anticipated. I got it right in the first try. That's a big deal. Not having to remold that thing is a huge deal. Getting the weights in the proper place for it to actually do what it's supposed to do is also a real big deal. So now we're gonna put that to the test. I think it can catch fish, but can it? Let's see. Bring him in, Dominic. Don't be a noob. On the 6-incher, buddy.
Give me a
high five. Little D.
Hit or miss. I guess
first dude to get a fish with the 6-incher. Here. Oh, freaking big largie. It's a big ass smallmouth. Here, Dominic, get it before it flies off. Yes! Oh, sweet. Here, my fish. Ooh, it was about to come off too. Oh, look at that monster, dude.
I need to take pictures.
On the 6-incher, buddy.
Yeah, but that thing hit me like a freight train. Hold on. Get back. All right, here.
Hey, bud.
Freaking chunk, man. Whew.
Dang, high five. I knew
There it was, everyone. Let me know what you think. I know I left out some parts to keep this video kind of streamlined, but I'll get about the molding process and how I did a mold for this deal, and how I pour for these things later. Those are pretty extensive videos. I didn't want this thing to be a million minutes long. So stay tuned for those details, and those will be coming out here very soon. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this inspires you to kind of take charge and make your own stuff, because it's fairly easy. You just got to put a little time into it. See ya.